Appreciate this guy for getting up early. He is the governor of my home state, Bill Lee. Even though he is an Auburn Tiger graduate, he has been up to a decent number of University of Tennessee events, among others. Do you get much of a negative blowback, Governor, over the Auburn connection, or are most people willing to forgive it?
No, I don't get a lot of blowback. You know what? When you become the governor of Tennessee, you love the University of Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
So, and I always have, but no, I don't get blowback. People love the way we love our schools in the SEC, and the SEC's the best conference in the country. So now I do like to give other governors a hard time about that. It's cool being a Southern governor because you get to talk to these guys around the country. They all wish they were us.
Yeah, right. Well, also, you have something in common, at least as an Auburn grad, and that is a hate for the University of Alabama, which also translates well as a Tennessee governor.
Yeah, in fact, unless you went to Auburn or lived in Alabama, you don't really know just how bad that is.
Yes.
But, yeah, you're exactly right. That's a common thread.
I think I've asked you this before, but I'll ask you again because I think it was an interesting story. Where were you when the kick six happened?
So I gave my tickets to my sons. I have two boys. They're twins. Yep. And they wanted to go to the game so badly. And so we were at Thanksgiving and all the families there and everything. And I said, boys, if you want to go to the game, I will give you my tickets. So they went. I watched on TV. And you know what? If it were anybody else, I would have had enormous, deep regret. But there's nothing that made me happier than my two boys, who both graduated from Auburn, to be able to go to that game.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great point as being a dad, because I've talked about this quite a bit on the show. I'm coaching Little League Baseball, and one of the best things about having young kids is you get to see the world of sports back through their eyes, and it reminds you of how, just innocent and pure sports is when you're 8, 9, 10, 11. Before you hit puberty, get a little bit more cynical when you think you're going to be a pro athlete, no matter how good or bad you are at a sport. Being able to see that sort of back through the kid's eyes again is a pretty cool experience. I know you got to probably experience that over the years as being a dad as well.
Yeah, I had a daughter who was a young, athlete and track star. And just to tell you how old I am, but I went to the Atlanta Olympics for her 9th birthday.
Yeah.
And going to the Olympics is great, but watching your kid, living, like you say, living your life through your kid, watching your kids with their eyes fully wide open in settings like that is more enjoyable than doing it yourself.
What 92 Olympic events did you go to in Atlanta?
We went to the gold medal night of track and field.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I went to one, I got to go to one thing, and one we drove down there and spent one evening, and it was the gold medal night for track and field. So it was, it couldn't have been any better.
So how cool of an environment was that? Because 92, I'm trying to remember who would have been the runners. Was that still Carl Lewis, or had they transitioned from like the Carl Lewis and Florence Griffith Joyner era?
Yeah, they had transitioned from that. I should look it up because you
can look up who won while my producer here. He can look up who won, and we'll come back to that in a sec. He'll shoot me a text and let me know.
But to have your kids, so it was just me and my daughter, and dressing our American flags, and you get down there, and the stadium is packed, just massive stadium, packed, and the torch is going, and all of the American flags are, and the Star Spangled Banner's playing everything. You've never been so proud to be an American. And then you watch these world-class athletes and the roar of the crowd of a track and field event when they go around the field. You can see the cameras flashing around in a circle. And I will never forget it. But most importantly, I'll never forget my daughter's face as she watched that unfold.
By the way, it's 96 Olympics, by the way, as some people are pointing out, because 92 Olympics was in Barcelona. Atlanta had 96. So that, all the years run together at some point. A lot of people remember the 96 Olympics. You're talking about your daughter, kind of experience. What's also wild about that is thinking about the 96 Olympics was, for many people, that gymnastics. Carrie Strug sort of sticking the one-handed vault, I think it was, to win with the 96 Olympic women's team, I think is probably the iconic moment that a lot of people think about when they contemplate exactly what that would look like.
Yeah, and then you had the tragic bombing.
Of course, which
Olympics too,
they totally forgot about. And the Richard Jewell, which had the movie that came out, but it took a long time before they found out who exactly was responsible for that, which is crazy too.
Yeah. So I just looked up. Carl Lewis won the long jump.
Yep, in 1996.
Yeah, and anyway, yeah, that's great. I'd like to go back again, but I don't think they're doing. I guess they're doing it in Tokyo, but I don't know what that's going to be like.
It's not going to be anything like normal because I don't think they're going to have that many crowds present. I mean, I hope that it can be somewhat normalcy, but in July, I think it starts late July. I think it'll be fun to watch on television. But I don't think it'll have anywhere near the vibe that the traditional Olympics does. We're talking
let me just say, I hope that we start having some crowds.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you about that. We're talking to Governor Bill Lee, the governor of the state of Tennessee. So let's talk about that for a minute. I was out in downtown Nashville on Saturday, one of the first times I've been out in a long time in the downtown area. And I got to be honest with you, Governor, I looked around. The bands were playing. It was perfect weather, tons of people on the sidewalks. I was up on a rooftop, and it felt, for the first time that I've been in downtown Nashville, almost completely 100% normal. And I know you've been instrumental in opening the state of Tennessee back up, but sometimes there's been a disconnect between the state and cities. But for people out there who are wondering, hey, is a city like Nashville open? I know you're obviously the state capital's in downtown, so I know you spend a lot of time there. It feels very normal to me. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, so parts of it are normal. You're exactly right. I love the way downtown looks right now. You go down there on Friday night, go down there on any night, and it's it feels like Nashville again. The party buses and the parties downtown, the whole thing.
The lines to get into bars. I mean, it felt 100% normal.
It's absolutely great. The difference is that, buildings are not full of people yet. Companies are not fully back, but a lot of them are making that change. And then, of course, conventions that canceled and then had to rebook have booked through in the summer and in the fall. So we don't have the convention traffic that we had, but it's coming back. Some of them are coming back, and we're starting to have events. I'm doing everything I can. I've been on Fox News a couple times in the last week or so saying, hey, we're open. We'd like you to be here. We want to have, concerts and conventions and parades and proms, and it's time that we're in a new season. It's time to move on with a vaccine available to every single person in the state. No waiting lines. No, can walk up to any health department and get vaccines. Then that changes everything. And from my perspective, it means that people have evaluated their risk and they've made their own personal decisions based on the risk that they see to them. And the government needs to get out of the way because the time for health interventions is over. And that's where we are as a state. And I'm hoping that happens in state after state across the country because we need the country to open up, frankly.
I agree. Let's talk about sports in particular. So let's start outdoors. You've got Tennessee Titans Stadium in downtown Nashville. You got the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. The University of Memphis, let's use as an example, big outdoor stadium there as well. Bristol for the Motor Speedway. In your opinion, should outdoor stadiums going forward basically have 100% capacity? I asked that, by the way. We've had several stadiums. The Texas Rangers are 100% capacity. The Braves down in Atlanta are going to 100% capacity. Both outdoor stadiums, state of Georgia, state of Texas. In your mind, should those stadiums in the state of Tennessee be open and available for 100% capacity at this point going forward?
Absolutely. I mean, anyone that goes to that event has had an opportunity to either be vaccinated or made the choice to not be vaccinated. And that means that it's now up to individuals to make those kind of decisions. No one's being put at risk that doesn't choose to be put at risk. It was one thing back in the day when, if you visited a nursing home, the nursing home residents couldn't, you were putting them at risk. Or if you went somewhere and crowded in a place, you're putting other people at risk. That's over. So yes, we should have full capacity at any outdoor stadium. Frankly, I'm hoping the Preds play at full capacity in Bridgestone.
That was going to be my next question, because then you've got the Memphis Grizzlies, obviously in the NBA, and you've got the Nashville Predators indoors in downtown Nashville. In your opinion, is it time to consider also allowing full capacity indoor for those venues, like the UFC 261 down in Jacksonville in Florida had 15,000 normal, totally sold out arena? In your opinion, is it time to also consider that for indoor venues?
Yeah, I think it is. And, there's something we got to remember. We all live with some level of risk every single day for a number of different things, right? COVID was new to the scene last year, and it brought a lot of unknown risk, but we now know what the risk is, and we know how to manage that risk. And we don't have a crisis anymore. We don't have a hospitalization or healthcare capacity crisis. We know what it is. We know how it works. We know what the risks are. We know how it spreads. So now we manage that. It's a managed health issue like any other managed health issue that we have. And we don't make, radical adjustments in any other way for a managed health issue, and we shouldn't. I mean, changes were important. We had to do it when it was right to do it. But there's a time for things to snap back, and we're going to have COVID with us for a long time. So we can't make decisions based on the fact that someone might get infected. That's going to be true from here on forward. So we should live life, we should open for business, and we should move ahead with what we got.
What do you think about the idea of mandating vaccines in order to, for instance, go to sporting events? Is that something that you're 100% opposed to?
I'm absolutely opposed to that. There's a lot of reasons that people make personal decisions to get a vaccine or not. I hope people get vaccines. It creates herd immunity. It does all kinds of things. It's been a very important piece, as we've seen in this country. It has, when the vaccine came out, it drove numbers down. So, but it's a personal decision that people have to make based on risk analysis. The vaccine was developed in an emergency authorization use. We should not require. I do not think vaccine passports. I don't think requiring people to take a vaccine is appropriate in any setting. People need to make their own choice about that.
I think this is a fascinating question for you, and I'm not sure I've asked it before, but it's something that a lot of governors have had to deal with. Sometimes there are different decisions made by larger cities within your states, and then obviously you are the governor of the entire state. How do you balance relationships with mayors in large population centers in your state while also pushing towards what you believe is the right decision for the entire state, whether people are living in a city, suburban area, rural area? I think that's just a fascinating political dilemma that everybody in your shoes has had to deal with.
Yeah, couple of thoughts about that from my perspective. Allowing decisions to be made at the local level. Whenever things are closest to the people, when government's closest to the people, that's the best kind of government. And that's the reason that local decision making is oftentimes, most of the time, it's the right way to do things. But there are times when that doesn't work out so well, or it's not in the best interest of the state. And that's when you kind of have to work with this dilemma that you're talking about. But for me, throughout the pandemic, one of the key things was for us to communicate. So I had calls with what I call the big six mayors. We had 89 counties in our state are kind of run by the state health departments, and then 6 counties, which include the biggest cities. Those have independent decision-making that are separate from the state. That's true in a whole lot of states. That's how it kind of works. That's why you have Nashville operating differently than the state, and maybe I'm saying you ought to be open and the mayor not opening. But we had calls on a regular basis with the big 6 mayors. We talked about our differences. We communicate. We tried to work together, remembering what you agree upon and working together to work, in a way that is amiable, even if you have disagreements. That's kind of how it ought to work. So I kept a relationship with them throughout. Now, when we disagreed, I was public about it. And I generally would let them know, hey, I'm about to disagree with you publicly. I want to tell you why I am and what I think we ought to be doing, just out of respect for those leaders. But, we disagreed sometimes, and I was public about that. And that's how you lead people along, right? You can make your voice known and work through it. But it's really the way, it's like working together. That's kind of one of the tricks you got to do as a governor.
We're talking to Tennessee Governor Bill Lee. When you look forward, obviously things are getting much better in terms of a return to normalcy. But when you look back, one of the things that I would say I think you did well is you helped to ensure that a lot of schools were open and also that a lot of sports were getting played, whether it's high school sports, whether it was college sports, all over the state of Tennessee. Governors made different decisions. I've said before on this show, my kids went back to school in August. They are going to finish a full year of in-person learning in a couple of weeks. And I live down the road from where you used to live a lot of time. I know you still go out there a lot in Franklin, Tennessee. But it's a remarkable achievement. But still, some kids got left behind. Looking back, knowing now what you know, with, like we say, Monday morning quarterback, hindsight being 2020, what do you think you guys got right in Tennessee? What do you wish you had done a little bit better?
I believed from the very beginning that kids ought to go to school in person.
Yeah.
And there never was any science. I mean, we watched this thing all through the summer. So, the first couple of months, back in April, May, when no one knew anything about what was going to happen, we shut down schools, everybody did. And that was probably the right thing to do because we didn't know what kind of risks were coming for our kids. But then went through the summer, and we figured out kids don't get this, and when they do, they don't get sick. And so we evaluated that risk, and we pushed really hard for schools to open in August. So the districts, again, every state's different, and every state has different laws. And in our state, the statute gives local decision-making on school opening to the districts. We actually changed that law this year, but the law, in an emergency, but the law allows for school districts to make their own decisions. So they had to decide whether they're going to be open or not. I went out early in August and traveled across the state and said, kids need to be in person. Kids need to be in the classroom. There is no evidence that kids are going to get sick and die through this process. And it's incredibly important that their education continue. And here's the other thing. There's a whole lot of kids that get their nutrition and their mental health services and their protection from child abuse, because teachers are the highest reporter of abuse of children in the country. When kids are sitting out of classrooms, nobody is watching them, the ones that need somebody to get an eye on them in the classroom. So besides academics, there's all kinds of reasons why kids ought to be in a classroom. And I pushed hard. We were one of the early states to open. The vast majority of our districts did open, and ultimately the two biggest districts didn't, and I pushed hard. In the State of the State address this year, I called out the districts that weren't open and said they should really evaluate their decision-making because these kids are struggling. They're experiencing a massive amount of learning loss, and we should get those schools open. And so I pushed hard. We got them open. All our districts are open, and it's very important.
Let's go back to sports for a second. I appreciate all the time here. Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee talking with us. So high school sports play basically throughout the state of Tennessee. College sports, including, as we talked about earlier, the SEC, but also smaller conference schools as well. How gratifying is it now to have gotten those entire seasons in college football, college basketball, paramount sports that matter a lot to many people in the state and also to the nation, and have had no ill health effects in the grand scheme of things, both hospitalization for coaches or players to speak of, and to have been able to make that happen when so many people out there were saying there's no way to play sports?
Yeah. Not only were they saying there's no way to play sports, think about this. When we made the decision to open schools, we had health officials say children are going to die and the blood's going to be on your hands. I mean,
yeah.
There was serious pushback to opening up schools and letting kids play football. But I'll also say I think the most popular political decision of my entire 2.5 years so far was when we announced that we were going to allow high school football in Tennessee. Like that transcended every decision I'd made so far, and turns out that was a good one. Kids' lives are just a whole lot more. It's a whole lot more than just making sure that they don't have any risk to a particular sickness. I mean, this is their high school life, and it's important to them. And athletics is a very important part, and mental health is an important part, and kids' futures is an important part, and the ability for families to come together on Friday nights is very, very important. And you have to have something in the midst of crisis and difficulty to give you hope. There has to be things that people are looking forward to. They were dark days. They were scary days. People didn't know what was happening. But you know what? Kids could look forward to practice. They could look forward to a game. Parents could look forward to Friday night. Communities across this state could look forward to, whatever sporting event their kid was going to be in. And you and I talked about kids earlier. If you think you get joy out of your kids watching something, you also get a tremendous amount of joy watching your kids.
Yeah.
And that happened, and it was important that it happened.
Governor Bill Lee, I know you're a busy guy. I appreciate you getting up early for us to come on Outkick here, and thanks for all the work you did to make sports happen, and hopefully more and more sports normalcy coming in the days ahead. Keep working on the Preds, and certainly as well on the Grizz. Indoor crowds would be, I think, probably the next step.
Yeah, I said hope a little bit earlier, and I'll just say this. Sports do give people hope. Sports gives you hope in the middle of an otherwise kind of bleak situation. So stay pushing it out there, and we'll do our part too.
Thank you very much. That's Governor Bill Lee, State of Tennessee.